The moment Adriana Vale walked through that restaurant door with her designer dress torn down to her thigh, she had two choices: run away in humiliation or face the stranger waiting at table 12. What she didn't know was that the blue-collar contractor sitting there would become the only person who could save her when her billion-dollar empire came crashing down 18 months later. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The Friday evening traffic in Nashville moved like cold honey, brake lights painting the downtown streets in waves of red frustration. Caleb Turner sat in his decade-old F-150, right hand drumming against the steering wheel, left hand gripping a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. I swear to God, Caleb, if you bail on this, I'm never setting you up again. Marcus's voice crackled through the truck's ancient speakers. You've never set me up before, Caleb muttered, eyes fixed on the gridlock ahead. Exactly. And after tonight, my track record will be perfect. 1 for 1. Don't ruin this for me. Caleb exhaled slowly, watching a couple argue on the sidewalk outside a boutique hotel. Marcus, I've got a 5-year-old who thinks dinosaurs are still alive, a crew that can barely show up on time, and exactly 0 hours in my day for what? For living? For remembering you're 34, not 64? Marcus cut him off with the sharpness of a friend who'd known him since high school. Sarah's with your mom tonight. Your guys know not to call unless something's literally on fire. You've got no excuses, brother. The traffic lurched forward half a car length. What's her name again? Caleb asked. Does it matter? You're meeting her in 20 minutes. It matters if I'm supposed to pretend this wasn't your idea. Adriana, happy now? Park the truck and get your ass in there. Table 12, 7 o'clock sharp. And Caleb? Yeah? Wear something without drywall dust on it. The line went dead before Caleb could respond. He'd cleaned up as best he could in the 10 minutes he'd given himself after leaving the Belmont job site. His hands still carried the ghost of the day's work, small cuts healing along his knuckles, calluses that no amount of scrubbing could soften. The shirt was clean, at least. Dark blue button-down he'd bought 3 years ago for a funeral and hadn't worn since. Jeans that weren't work jeans, which in Caleb's wardrobe meant they only had 1 paint stain instead of 7. The restaurant Marcus had chosen sat tucked between a craft cocktail bar and an art gallery in a part of downtown that had gentrified faster than Caleb could track. The kind of place where the menu didn't list prices, and the lighting was deliberately dim enough to hide the fact that the portions were deliberately small. He'd driven past it 100 times, never once considered going inside. Now, parallel parking with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to drive in tight construction sites, he wondered what the hell he was doing. The answer, he knew, sat in a pink bedroom across town surrounded by stuffed animals and chapter books. Sarah, his daughter, the center of gravity around which his entire life orbited. She'd asked him 2 weeks ago, completely out of nowhere, why she didn't have a mommy who lived with them like Emma's mommy did. Caleb had been helping her brush her teeth at the time, both of them reflected in the bathroom mirror, her in princess pajamas, him still in work boots and sawdust-covered jeans. The question had hit him like a missed step on a ladder, that split second of freefall before your brain catches up. You have a mommy, sweetheart, he'd said carefully. She lives far away. Does she ever want to visit? I don't know, baby. Oh. Sarah had spit toothpaste into the sink with the intense concentration of a 5-year-old. Emma's mommy brings snacks to school and makes her lunch with notes inside. That conversation had haunted Caleb for days, circling back every time he watched Sarah at the playground, studying the other families with an awareness that broke his heart. He couldn't fix the past. Couldn't change the fact that Sarah's mother had left when she was 8 months old, disappeared into a life in California that didn't have room for the mess and chaos of an unplanned baby. But maybe, he'd thought in a moment of desperation that led him to actually answer when Marcus called, maybe he could at least try to build something different for the future. The restaurant door was heavier than it looked, solid wood with brass fixtures that probably cost more than Caleb's monthly mortgage. Inside, the space opened into warm lighting and quiet conversation, the kind of atmosphere that made him immediately conscious of his work boots on the polished floor. A hostess, who couldn't have been older than 22, appeared with a smile that was professionally pleasant and nothing more. Good evening. Do you have a reservation? Turner, table 12. She consulted her tablet with a small frown. Table 12 is reserved for two. Are you the first one here? Yeah. Caleb shifted his weight, hyper aware of how he must look compared to the couple being seated near the window, both in clothes that screamed expense without trying. Right this way. Table 12 sat against the far wall, positioned with a view of both the entrance and a side window that looked out onto a narrow courtyard garden. The hostess pulled out a chair with practiced grace. Your server will be right with you. Can I start you with still or sparkling water? Tap's fine. If she registered any judgment, she hit it well. Of course. Alone at the table, Caleb pulled out his phone. 6:47 p.m. 13 minutes early, which was about right. He'd learned a long time ago that showing up on time meant showing up early. The construction business ran on daylight and deadlines, and both punished the unprepared. A text from his mother appeared. Sarah wants to show you her Lego castle when you get home. I told her it might be late. Have fun tonight, honey. Another from Marcus. Don't check your phone at the table. Eye contact. Ask questions. Smile like you mean it. Caleb ignored both, instead pulling up the last photo on his camera roll. Sarah, 2 days ago, holding a drawing she'd made at school. Stick figures labeled Me and Daddy, standing in front of a rectangular house with a triangle roof and flowers that were taller than the people. The sun in the corner had a smile on it. Excuse me, are you waiting for someone? Caleb looked up into the face of his server, 30-ish, friendly expression, name tag that read Josh. Yeah, should be here any minute. No rush. Can I get you started with a drink while you wait? Water's good for now. Josh nodded and vanished with the efficiency of someone who'd mastered the art of being present without hovering. The restaurant continued its quiet hum around him. Soft jazz from speakers he couldn't see, the clink of silverware on plates. A woman's laugh, sharp and genuine, from somewhere near the bar. Caleb found himself watching the door, trying to guess which person would turn out to be Adriana. The couple entering now? No, they were clearly together, his hand on the small of her back. The woman being greeted by someone already seated? Wrong direction. 6:53 p.m. He should have asked Marcus what she looked like, or literally anything about her beyond her name. For all he knew, she could be... The restaurant door opened, and Caleb's train of thought derailed completely. The woman who hurried inside moved like someone late to an important meeting, her stride purposeful, despite the obvious hitch in her step. Dark hair pulled into a style that was probably meant to be elegant, but had started to come loose. Earrings that caught the light. And a dress, deep blue, expensive looking, the kind of thing that probably had a designer name attached, that had a visible tear running down the left side from hip to mid-thigh. She tried to pin it. He could see the safety pins catching the light, a hasty repair that only drew more attention to the damage. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and something clicked into place with a certainty that Caleb couldn't explain. He knew, without introduction or confirmation, that this was his blind date, and she knew he knew. The embarrassment that flashed across her face was so raw, so human, that every bit of Caleb's nervousness evaporated in an instant. She approached the table with her chin up, fighting to maintain composure despite the disaster written across her appearance. Up close, she was striking, not in the polished, untouchable way of the women in magazines Sarah sometimes looked at in checkout lines, but in a way that suggested competence and intensity barely held in check. I am so sorry. The words came out before she even sat down, her voice carrying a precision that contrasted with her disheveled state. I know how this looks. I promise I'm not usually... This isn't... She gestured helplessly at the dress, the pins, the general chaos she was carrying. Caleb stood, the movement automatic, the manners his mother had drilled into him overriding everything else. You must be Adriana, and you must be wondering what kind of disaster Marcus set you up with. She laughed, but there was an edge of genuine distress under it. My car door caught the dress when I was getting out. I heard it rip and just... I should have gone home and changed, but I was already running late, and I thought maybe I could just pin it, and clearly that was a terrible idea, and I'm rambling now, aren't I? She finally stopped for breath, still standing across from him, hands clenched at her sides like she was physically holding herself together. Caleb smiled. Not the polite smile he'd planned to use, but something real. You still look beautiful. Adriana blinked. Whatever response she'd been expecting, that wasn't it. Thank you, but you don't have to. Hang on, Caleb said, already moving. Stay right here. 1 second. He was out the door before she could protest, ignoring the confused look from the hostess as he pushed past. The evening air hit cool after the warmth of the restaurant. His truck sat exactly where he'd left it, and he unlocked it with practiced speed. In the narrow space behind the front seats, he kept a go-bag of essentials, change of clothes for emergencies, basic tools, first aid kit. He grabbed the flannel shirt from the top, navy blue, soft from 100 washings, nothing fancy but clean. Back inside, Adriana hadn't moved. She stood by table 12 like someone caught between flight and fight, her expression cycling through confusion, curiosity, and something that might have been hope. Caleb held out the flannel. It's not exactly high fashion, but it's clean, and it'll cover the, situation. She stared at the offered shirt like it was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. You keep spare clothes in your truck? Construction. You learn to plan for unexpected messes. This is... She took the shirt, fabric soft in her hands. This is incredibly kind. You don't even know me. Not yet, Caleb agreed. But the night's still young. For a moment, neither of them moved. The restaurant continued around them. Conversations, laughter, the subtle clink of dishes. But at table 12, the world had narrowed to just two people trying to figure out what happened next. Adriana's grip tightened on the flannel. I'll be right back. She disappeared toward the restrooms with the same purposeful stride she'd entered with, only now carrying a piece of Caleb's world with her. Josh materialized at Caleb's elbow with perfect timing. Everything okay? Yeah, Caleb said, settling back into his chair. Everything's good. Would you like to order drinks while you wait? Maybe give us a few minutes when she gets back? Josh nodded and melted away again. Caleb sat alone at table 12, very aware that this was not how he'd expected the evening to go. Marcus's instructions echoed in his head: eye contact, ask questions, smile like you mean it, but already the script had been thrown out. This wasn't going to be a normal first date, whatever that even meant. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Status report? Caleb typed back. You didn't mention she'd show up with a wardrobe malfunction. 3 dots appeared immediately. What handled it? Talk later. He put the phone face down on the table just as Adriana returned. The transformation was complete. She'd tied the flannel around her waist, the arms wrapped and knotted so the body of the shirt hung down, completely covering the tear. With her hair smoothed back and her composure rebuilt, she looked like an entirely different person. Still elegant, but now with an edge of practical resourcefulness that hadn't been there before. Okay, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. Let's try this again. Hi, I'm Adriana Vale, and apparently I'm the kind of person who shows up to blind dates in torn clothing and borrowed shirts. Caleb matched her tone. Caleb Turner. I run a construction company and keep emergency flannel in my truck, which tonight makes me either overprepared or weirdly fortunate. Both, Adriana said immediately. Definitely both. She picked up her menu, then set it back down without looking at it. Can I just say, and I promise I'm not usually this intense right out of the gate, but that might be the nicest thing anyone's done for me and longer than I want to admit. It's a shirt. It's Grace. She met his eyes, and Caleb saw something flicker there. Gratitude, yes, but also a kind of exhaustion he recognized, the weariness of someone who'd been handling everything alone for too long. Most people would have been uncomfortable, or worse, overly sympathetic in that pitying way. You just solved the problem. No drama, no making me feel worse than I already did. Caleb shrugged, uncomfortable with the weight she was putting on what had seemed like an obvious choice. My daughter taught me that sometimes people just need help, not commentary. You have a daughter? Sarah, she's 5. Currently at my mom's house building what she assures me is the world's most important Lego castle. Something in Adriana's expression shifted, softened. And you left the Lego castle to be here? Well, I wasn't invited to the construction crew. Union rules, apparently, very exclusive. That earned him a real laugh, the kind that reached her eyes and erased years from her face. Josh appeared as if summoned by the sound, and they ordered drinks. Whiskey neat for her, which surprised him in a good way, and a local beer for him. So, Adriana said once Josh had departed, Marcus tells you anything about me? Your name. That's literally it. Efficient. She traced a pattern on the tablecloth with one finger. He tell you what I do? Nope. Good. Let's keep it that way for now, if that's okay. I'd like to just be a person tonight, not a job title. It was such an odd thing to say that Caleb found himself intrigued. Fair enough. Though construction company owner isn't exactly mysterious. I fix things. Houses, mostly. Sometimes commercial properties, if the money's right and the work's interesting. Do you like it? Fixing things? Running your own company? Caleb considered the question, appreciating that she'd asked it. Most people wanted to know about the business. How many employees? What kind of projects? How much did he make? But she was asking about something else entirely. It's hard, he said honestly. Some days I wonder why I didn't just stay working for someone else, take the steady paycheck and leave the headaches to them. But then I finish a job and the client shows me what we built, and there's this look on their face like we just gave them something they'd been dreaming about. Or one of my guys figures out a solution to a problem we've been wrestling with, and I see him stand a little taller because he knows he's good at what he does. Those moments make it worth it. The people part, Adriana said softly. Yeah, the people part. Their drinks arrived, and they fell into the easy rhythm of two people discovering each other. Adriana asked about Sarah, what she was like, what being a single dad felt like, how he managed the balance between work and parenting. Her questions were specific, engaged, the kind that made Caleb realize she was actually listening instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. He learned that she'd grown up in Atlanta, moved to Nashville 4 years ago for work, and had a coffee addiction that bordered on problematic. She ran 5 miles every morning before the sun came up, read mystery novels to fall asleep, and had strong opinions about proper barbecue that contradicted everything Caleb thought he knew about regional cooking. You're telling me, he said, gesturing with his beer for emphasis, that vinegar-based is better than dry rub? In Tennessee? I'm telling you that limiting yourself to geographical loyalty means missing out on objectively superior flavor profiles. Those are fighting words. Are you going to defend dry rub's honor? Challenge sparkled in her eyes. I'm going to order the ribs and let the evidence speak for itself. They ordered food, ribs for him, salmon for her, and the conversation never stopped flowing. Adriana had a way of tilting her head when she was thinking, like she was examining an idea from different angles before responding. Caleb caught himself watching for it, waiting to see what she'd say next. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, as Adriana was telling him about a disastrous attempt at paddleboarding on Percy Priest Lake, Caleb realized something that should have been alarming, but somehow wasn't. He didn't want the night to end. This woman, this stranger who'd walked in wearing a torn dress and his flannel shirt, had somehow bypassed all his carefully maintained walls in the space of 2 hours. She was sharp and funny and carried herself with a confidence that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in the room, but she wasn't performing for him. She was just present. Can I ask you something? Adriana said, setting down her fork with the precise care of someone who'd been taught proper table manners young. Shoot. Why'd you agree to this? The blind date. Marcus said he had to push pretty hard to get you here. Caleb took a drink, buying time to find words for something he hadn't fully articulated even to himself. My daughter asked me about her mom, he said finally. Not in a sad way, just curious. She's at that age where she's noticing that families look different, and I realized I've been so focused on just getting through each day, work, parenting, making sure she has everything she needs, that I haven't thought about what else might be possible. What else? This. Someone to talk to who isn't 5 years old or trying to negotiate overtime pay. Someone who... He trailed off, then forced himself to finish. Someone who might want to stick around long enough to be part of the picture Sarah's drawing when she thinks about family. Adriana was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, that's a lot of pressure to put on a first date. Shit, you're right. I didn't say I minded. She smiled, but there was something vulnerable in it now. Just that it's honest, which is refreshing, actually. Most first dates are about showing your best angles and hiding everything messy. My life is 90% mess right now. Hiding it seems like false advertising. Mine too, she said quietly. Different kind of mess, but she shook her head. You know what? Never mind. Tonight isn't about that. But Caleb had seen the shadow cross her face, the same exhaustion he'd noticed when she first sat down. Whatever stress she was carrying, it ran deep. You okay? He asked. Honestly? I don't know anymore. She caught herself, straightened. But I'm good right now, in this moment. That counts for something. Josh appeared with dessert menus, breaking the heavy moment. They ordered coffee, decaf for her, regular for him, and split a piece of chocolate cake that was too rich and too good. So what's the verdict? Caleb asked as they waited for the check. Worst blind date ever, or the flannel shirt makes it automatically memorable, Adriana said, glancing down at where it was still tied around her waist. Beyond that, I think Marcus might actually know what he's doing. Don't tell him that. His ego's already unbearable. Deal. She paused, then added carefully, Would you want to do this again? Without the wardrobe emergency? Relief flooded through Caleb's chest. Yeah, I really would. They exchanged numbers while Josh processed the check. Caleb insisted on paying. Adriana pushed back. They compromised on splitting it. Outside, the Nashville night had cooled to something pleasant. The downtown streets quieter now as Friday evening shifted toward Friday night. I should let you get back to your daughter, Adriana said, but she didn't move toward the parking garage she'd pointed out. She's asleep by now. But yeah, I should. But Caleb trailed off, not quite ready to say goodbye. The shirt, Adriana said suddenly. I should give it back. Keep it. Consider it a souvenir. Of the worst entrance in blind date history? Of the night we met. She smiled at that, soft and genuine. Okay, but only if you promise to let me return the favor sometime. How do you return a flannel shirt? I'll figure something out. She took a step back, then another. Good night, Caleb Turner. Good night, Adriana Vale. He watched her walk toward the garage, the flannel shirt visible with each step. Just before she disappeared around the corner, she turned and waved. He waved back. The drive home took 20 minutes, and Caleb spent most of it replaying the evening in his head. The way she'd laughed. The precise way she asked questions. The vulnerability she'd tried to hide when talking about her own life. His phone buzzed at a red light. Adriana. Home safe. Thank you for tonight, and for the shirt, and for not making me feel like an idiot. Caleb. You could never look like an idiot. Coffee sometime this week? Adriana. Tuesday? There's a place by the river I like. Caleb. Send me the address. I'll be there. At home, his mother met him at the door with the knowing smile of someone who'd been waiting up despite her protests that she wasn't. How was it? She asked. Good. Really good, actually. Good enough for a second date? Coffee on Tuesday. His mother pulled him into a hug, quick and fierce. I'm proud of you, honey. You deserve to be happy. In Sarah's room, his daughter slept curled around a stuffed elephant, the Lego castle dominating her desk. Caleb stood in the doorway watching her breathe, steady and peaceful, and felt the familiar weight of single parenthood settle back onto his shoulders. But now there was something else there, too. Something light and unexpected. Hope. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of spring rain that Nashville wore like perfume. Soft, persistent, turning the city's edges gentle. Caleb had been awake since 5, not from anxiety, but from the restless energy of someone who'd forgotten what anticipation felt like. He'd checked his phone twice before sunrise, found no new messages, and forced himself to focus on the mundane tasks that structured his mornings. Sarah had insisted on picking out his shirt, a ritual that had somehow developed over the weekend. She'd stood in front of his closet with the serious expression of a fashion consultant, finally selecting a gray Henley that she declared made him look like a dad but also like a person. What's the difference? Caleb had asked, pulling the shirt over his head. Dads wear boring stuff. People wear nice stuff. She'd paused, reconsidering. You're both, so you need both. The logic was unassailable. Now, standing outside the coffee shop Adriana had suggested, Caleb watched through the rain-streaked window as she sat at a corner table, laptop open, fingers moving across the keyboard with the focused intensity of someone deep in concentration. She wore glasses today, dark frames that somehow made her look both more severe and more approachable. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she'd traded Friday's elegance for jeans and a cream-colored sweater that looked expensive in its simplicity. He pushed through the door, setting off a small bell that she didn't seem to hear. The coffee shop smelled like espresso and cardamom, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, the kind of place that probably posted its sourcing ethics on Instagram. 3 other people scattered throughout: a student with headphones, an older man reading a newspaper, a woman sketching in a journal. Caleb was halfway to her table before Adriana looked up, and the smile that broke across her face erased any remaining nervousness he'd been carrying. "You're early," she said, closing the laptop. "Construction habits. Show up late, lose money." "I like it. Reliability is underrated." She gestured to the chair across from her. "I ordered you a coffee. Black, right? You struck me as a black coffee person." Caleb sat, touched by the small observation. "Good instinct." "I'm good at reading people." She said it matter-of-factly, not bragging. "It's part of what I do." "Which you still haven't told me about." "Which I still haven't told you about," she agreed. "How was the Lego castle construction?" "Architecturally ambitious, structurally questionable." She added a tower on Sunday that defies several laws of physics. Adriana laughed, genuine and warm. "I would like to see this tower." The casual statement carried weight they both recognized. The implication of future meetings, of crossing the threshold from coffee dates to actual life. Caleb met her eyes and saw the same careful hope he felt reflected back. "She'd like that," he said. "Fair warning, though. She asks approximately 8,000 questions per hour." "What kind of questions?" "Last week she wanted to know why clouds don't fall down, where thoughts come from, and whether dinosaurs would like pizza." "Would they?" I said probably yes to the herbivores, no to the carnivores who'd rather eat us than pepperoni. Sound reasoning. A barista appeared with 2 mugs, setting them down with practiced efficiency. Caleb's coffee was indeed black, served in a ceramic cup that felt substantial in his hands. Adriana's was something pale and complicated, foam art creating a leaf pattern on the surface. "So," Adriana said, wrapping both hands around her mug, "I have a confession to make." Caleb's stomach tightened slightly. "Okay. I looked you up. After Friday. Turner Construction Services, right? The website needs work, but the reviews are incredible. Apparently you're some kind of miracle worker with dry rot." He relaxed, even smiled. "Dry rot is just patience and proper materials. Nothing miraculous about it." Mrs. Chen on Belmont Boulevard would disagree. She wrote 3 paragraphs about how you saved her grandmother's house from structural collapse and charged her half what the other companies quoted. "Mrs. Chen makes incredible dumplings. She paid me in food for 2 months. I think I came out ahead in that deal." Adriana studied him with open curiosity. "You really don't see it, do you?" "See what?" "How rare that is. Running a business where you actually care more about the work than the profit margin." Caleb shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the praise. "I care about profit. I have a daughter to feed and a crew to pay. But yeah, I also care about doing things right. Those aren't mutually exclusive." "In my experience, they often are." Something in her tone made Caleb lean forward slightly. "What do you do, Adriana? And don't say you're just good at reading people. That's not a job description." She took a long sip of her coffee, and Caleb could see her weighing how much to reveal. When she spoke, her voice carried a carefulness that hadn't been there before. "I run a logistics company. We manage supply chains for medium to large businesses, everything from inventory optimization to distribution strategy. It's not exciting dinner party conversation, but it's complex and challenging, and I'm good at it." "How good?" "Very. No false modesty, just fact. We've grown 300% in the last 2 years. 15 employees when I started, 78 now. Revenue projections for this year put us somewhere between 20 and 30 million, depending on which contracts close." Caleb blinked, recalibrating his entire understanding of the woman sitting across from him. "That's not a company. That's an empire." "It's a business, a successful one, but still just a business." And you run the whole thing?" "CEO, founder, occasionally janitor when everyone else has gone home." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's consuming. The kind of work that doesn't believe in evenings or weekends or the concept of work-life balance." "Is that why you didn't want to talk about it on Friday?" "Partly. People hear CEO and they make assumptions. Either I'm some kind of shark who stepped on people to get here, or I'm a diversity hire who got lucky, or I'm lying to sound impressive. It's exhausting. I don't think any of those things, Caleb said quietly. I know, that's why I'm telling you now. She met his gaze steadily. I wanted you to know me first, just Adriana, before all the other stuff got in the way. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows with increased urgency. Inside the coffee shop, the world felt small and safe, reduced to two people learning each other's truth. Thank you, Caleb said, for trusting me with that. Thank you for not being weird about it. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing between the profound and the mundane with the ease of people who'd somehow skipped past the awkward getting-to-know-you phase. Adriana told him about growing up with a single mother who'd worked 2 jobs to put her through college, about the scholarship to Georgia Tech that had changed everything, about the mentor who'd believed in her business idea when every investor had said no. Caleb shared stories about Sarah's obsession with rocks. She collected them from every job site he visited, and the time his entire crew had shown up to her 4th birthday party in full construction gear because she'd asked them to. He talked about the house he was slowly renovating, 1 room at a time, trying to build something stable and beautiful for his daughter to grow up in. Can I ask you something personal? Adriana said as they prepared to leave, the rain finally easing to a drizzle. Sure. Sarah's mom, is she in the picture at all? Caleb had expected this question eventually. No, she left when Sarah was a baby, sends a card on birthdays, deposits child support when she remembers. That's it. That must be hard. For Sarah, yeah. For me? He considered. It was at first. I was terrified, 28 years old with an infant I barely knew how to feed, trying to run a business that was barely staying afloat. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being this tragedy and just became our life, our normal. You don't sound bitter. I was, for a while. But bitterness is heavy, and I was already carrying enough. He stood, gathering his jacket. Besides, I got Sarah out of it. Hard to stay angry when the end result is the best thing that ever happened to me. Outside, the sidewalk gleamed wet and clean. They stood under the coffee shop's awning, neither quite ready to separate. When can I see you again? Caleb asked. Are you free Thursday? There's a food truck rally downtown. Very casual, probably terrible for our arteries, completely worth it. I have a site meeting until 6, but I could meet you after? Perfect. Text me when you're close. Adriana stepped forward and hugged him, quick and surprising. She smelled like coffee and something floral he couldn't name. Then she was pulling back, walking toward a Tesla parked 3 spaces down, turning to wave before she got in. Caleb watched her drive away, then headed to his truck with a lightness in his chest that felt dangerously close to joy. The rest of the week unfolded in a rhythm that became familiar with startling speed. Text messages throughout the day, Adriana sending photos of particularly terrible PowerPoint presentations with commentary that made him laugh out loud on job sites. Caleb sharing pictures of Sarah's latest artistic endeavors and the more creative destruction his crew occasionally achieved. Thursday's food truck rally turned into 3 hours of wandering between vendors, arguing about the superiority of Korean barbecue versus authentic street tacos, people watching while perched on a concrete wall near the river. Adriana had loosened up even more, laughing freely, stealing bites of his food despite ordering her own, telling stories about logistics disasters with the comedic timing of someone who'd learned to find humor in chaos. So the shipping container arrives in Detroit instead of Dallas, she was saying, gesturing with a fork loaded with pad thai. And the client is calling me personally because apparently 20,000 units of organic dog food are now in the wrong state, and my warehouse manager is having what I can only describe as an emotional breakdown because the paperwork clearly says Dallas. And I'm thinking, this is it. This is the disaster that finally tanks my reputation. What did you do? Rerouted everything, ate the shipping costs, personally drove to the client's office with their first delivery and a very expensive bottle of whiskey. Turned it into a story about our commitment to customer service rather than the catastrophic error it actually was. Did it work? They're still our client, and they tell that story at conferences now as an example of great vendor relationships. She grinned. Sometimes perception is more important than reality. Caleb found himself studying her face in the glow of the string lights some vendor had hung between trucks. The sharp intelligence in her eyes, the way she committed fully to every expression, never performing but always present. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Just thinking you're really good at this. At eating pad thai? At everything. Running a company, turning disasters into wins. Being here right now like you don't have 78 employees depending on you." Her smile faltered slightly. "I'm good at compartmentalizing. It's a survival skill." "Is that healthy?" "Probably not, but it's necessary." There was something in her voice that made Caleb want to push, to ask what pressure she was under that required such rigid compartmentalization. But they'd only known each other a week, and some doors opened on their own timeline. Saturday brought an unexpected text. "Are you and Sarah free this afternoon? I found something she might like." Caleb stared at his phone, heart rate picking up. This was different. This was his daughter, his most precious and protected space. Letting Adriana into it felt enormous. Sarah was watching him from her spot on the couch, surrounded by picture books and crayons. "Who is it, Daddy?" "A friend. She wants to know if we want to hang out today." "What kind of friend?" "A good kind." "Is she nice?" "Very nice." Sarah considered this with the gravity of a high court judge. "Does she like rocks?" "I don't know. We could ask her." "Okay, but if she's mean to you, I'm going to use my karate." She demonstrated with a chop that wouldn't intimidate a butterfly, but came with a fierce expression that made Caleb's heart swell. They met at Centennial Park, near the Parthenon replica that dominated the landscape with its incongruous grandeur. Adriana was already there when they arrived, sitting on a bench with a bag beside her, wearing jeans and a simple blue t-shirt that made her look younger, more relaxed than Caleb had seen her. She stood as they approached, and Caleb caught the flash of nervousness in her expression. She cared about making a good impression on Sarah, he realized. The thought warmed him. "Hi," Adriana said, directing the greeting to Sarah with the respect of someone who understood children were people, not props. "I'm Adriana. You must be Sarah." Sarah pressed against Caleb's leg, suddenly shy. "Hi. Your dad told me you like rocks. Is that true?" A nod. "Good, because I found something today, and I wasn't sure who to give it to, but now I think maybe you're the perfect person." Adriana reached into her bag and pulled out a small rock, smooth and round, with bands of color running through it, purple and white and deep blue. "This is called an agate. I found it at a shop downtown, and I thought it was really pretty. Do you want it?" Sarah's eyes went wide. She looked up at Caleb for permission, got his nod, then stepped forward to take the rock with both hands like it was made of glass. "It's so pretty," she whispered. "I thought so too. You know what's cool about agates? Each one is totally unique. No two are exactly the same." "Like people?" "Exactly like people." And just like that, the ice broke. Sarah launched into an enthusiastic explanation of her rock collection, pulling Caleb toward a grassy area where she could show Adriana the proper way to search for interesting stones. Adriana followed with genuine interest, crouching beside Sarah to examine pebbles and listen to elaborate theories about which rocks were actually dragon eggs in disguise. Caleb hung back, watching the two of them together. Adriana asked questions that showed she was actually listening. What made one rock better than another? Where the best finding spots were? Whether rocks had feelings? Sarah responded with the kind of open trust she usually reserved for family, her initial shyness evaporating in the face of someone who took her seriously. An hour passed like water. They walked around the park, Sarah between them, sometimes holding both their hands when the path got uneven. She showed Adriana her favorite tree for climbing, the bench where she and Caleb ate ice cream after good report cards, the exact spot where she'd once seen a rabbit, and still checked every visit in case it came back. "Can Adriana come to our house?" Sarah asked as they walked back toward the parking lot, the question pitched with the careful casualness of a child testing boundaries. Caleb glanced at Adriana, who raised her eyebrows in a silent question. "Your call." "If she wants to," Caleb said. "But she might have other plans for today." "I don't, actually." Adriana smiled at Sarah. "I would love to see your house, especially the famous Lego castle I've been hearing about." Sarah's face lit up like someone had plugged her directly into the sun. The drive to Caleb's house took 15 minutes, Sarah chattering from her car seat in the back about everything they were going to show Adriana. Caleb caught Adriana following in her Tesla through the rearview mirror and felt a strange doubling of his world, the life he'd built with Sarah and this new possibility driving behind them. His house sat in a neighborhood that had seen better days but was slowly climbing back toward respectability. He'd bought it as a foreclosure 6 years ago, and every room bore evidence of his slow, patient renovation work. The porch he'd rebuilt last summer. The windows he'd replaced one by one. The garden Sarah had helped plant, currently exploding with wildflowers that had no respect for the neat rows they'd originally been assigned. "It's beautiful," Adriana said, stepping out of her car and looking at the house with an appraising eye that Caleb recognized. She was seeing not just what it was, but what it could become. "It's a work in progress. The best things are." Inside, Sarah immediately grabbed Adriana's hand and dragged her toward the bedroom to display the Lego castle in all its gravity-defying glory. Caleb followed, leaning in the doorway as Sarah provided a detailed tour of every architectural decision, every character placement, every story she'd invented for the plastic people who populated her kingdom. Adriana sat cross-legged on the floor, asking questions, admiring specific details, treating Sarah's creation with the seriousness it deserved. At one point, she looked up and caught Caleb watching, and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition, a shared moment of "this is good, this is really good." They stayed for dinner. Caleb made spaghetti, nothing fancy but solid and filling, while Adriana and Sarah set the table and argued about whether garlic bread was better with or without cheese. The conversation flowed easily, Sarah performing her greatest hits of kindergarten stories, Adriana matching her energy without condescension. After dinner, Sarah fell asleep on the couch, halfway through a movie about talking cars, her head on Adriana's lap, still clutching the agate. "I should probably get her to bed," Caleb whispered, not wanting to disturb the peaceful scene. "Let me help." Together, they carried Sarah to her room, Caleb holding her while Adriana pulled back the covers and arranged stuffed animals. Sarah barely stirred, settling into sleep with the absolute trust of a child who felt safe. Outside her room, in the hallway lit only by a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon, Adriana and Caleb stood close enough that he could count her breaths. "Thank you for today," he said quietly. "Thank you for letting me in. I know that wasn't easy." "It was, actually. That's what scares me." "Why does that scare you?" Caleb struggled to articulate the fear. "Because I'm not just myself anymore. Every choice I make affects her. And if I let someone in and it doesn't work out, she's the one who gets hurt." Adriana reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "I can't promise I won't screw this up. I'm good at work, Caleb, but I'm not always good at people, at letting them close. But I can promise I will never be careless with her. Or with you." The sincerity in her voice broke through his last defenses. He pulled her close, and she came willingly, her arms wrapping around him in the kind of embrace that felt like coming home. They stayed like that for a long moment, two people who'd found each other against all odds, holding on in the hallway of a slowly renovated house while a 5-year-old slept peacefully nearby. When Adriana finally left, it was late. Caleb walked her to her car under stars that were mostly hidden by Nashville's light pollution. At the driver's door, she turned and kissed him, soft and certain, a promise and a question all at once. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said. "You better." He watched her drive away, then went back inside to a house that felt fuller than it had in years. The next few weeks blurred together in the best possible way. Adriana became a regular presence in their lives, sometimes joining them for dinner, sometimes just meeting Caleb for quick lunches between meetings, always texting, always present even when physically absent. She fit into their routine with surprising ease. Sunday mornings became pancake mornings, the three of them cooking together in Caleb's kitchen with more laughter than actual culinary skill. Adriana turned out to be terrible at flipping pancakes, but excellent at keeping Sarah entertained with stories about the weird items her company had shipped, everything from live lobsters to custom bowling balls shaped like dinosaur eggs. Sarah adored her. That was clear within days. She started including Adriana in her drawings, 3 stick figures now instead of 2. She asked when Adriana was coming over with the same frequency she asked for snacks. She showed off for her, performing elaborate dances and demonstrating her reading skills with the pride of someone who'd found a new audience. Caleb watched it all with a mixture of joy and terror. They were building something here, the three of them, but foundations could crack if the weight got too heavy too fast. The flannel shirt became a running joke between them. Adriana wore it sometimes when she came over, rolled up at the sleeves, claiming it was the most comfortable thing she owned. She texted him a photo once of herself wearing it while taking out her trash at her apartment, captioned, "Still my rescue shirt." But underneath the easy comfort, Caleb started noticing things. The way Adriana's phone never stopped buzzing. The dark circles that appeared under her eyes despite the concealer she applied. The night she'd arrive at his house with her laptop and work through dinner, fingers flying across the keyboard, even as she chatted with Sarah about rocks and kindergarten politics. "You okay?" he asked one evening after Sarah had gone to bed, and Adriana was still glued to her screen. "Fine. Just putting out fires." "You say that a lot." "Because there are a lot of fires." She didn't look up. "It's the nature of the business. You must understand that, running your own company." "I do, but I also understand burnout." That made her pause. She closed the laptop slowly, meeting his eyes with something that looked like exhaustion wearing a mask of composure. "I'm handling it." "Are you?" "I have to." It wasn't an answer, and they both knew it. But before Caleb could push further, her phone rang. Her assistant, apparently, because Adriana's entire posture changed as she answered. The CEO voice came out, crisp and authoritative, discussing supplier negotiations and delivery schedules with the kind of fluency that reminded Caleb exactly how high stakes her world really was. The call lasted 20 minutes. When she hung up, the exhaustion was more visible. "I should go," she said. "Early meeting tomorrow." "Adriana." "I'm fine, Caleb. Really. Just busy season." She kissed him goodbye, but there was distraction in it, her mind already moving to whatever crisis awaited her attention. After she left, Caleb stood in his living room, feeling the first whisper of worry settle into his chest. Something was wrong. He didn't know what, and Adriana clearly wasn't ready to share it. But he recognized the signs of someone carrying too much alone because he'd been there himself. He texted her before bed. "I'm here if you need anything. No judgment, just support." The response came an hour later. "I know, thank you. I'm lucky to have you." But lucky and honest weren't the same thing, and as Caleb fell asleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Adriana was dealing with was bigger than she wanted him to know. The warning signs started small, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But Caleb had spent years reading blueprints and structural damage, learning to spot the hairline cracks before they became catastrophic failures. He saw the same pattern developing in Adriana, even as she worked harder to hide it. 3 days after his text offering support, she canceled their Wednesday dinner. "Work emergency," the message said. "Rain check?" The following week, she showed up 40 minutes late to Sarah's school art show, arriving breathless and apologetic, her professional mask slipping enough that Caleb could see the strain underneath. She'd stayed for 20 minutes, praised Sarah's finger painting with genuine enthusiasm, then fielded 3 phone calls in the hallway before disappearing with a hurried kiss and promises to make it up to them. Sarah had been understanding in the way children are when they don't want to admit disappointment. "Adriana's really busy, huh, Daddy?" "Yeah, baby, she is." "Is she going to be too busy to be our friend?" The question had hit Caleb square in the chest. "I hope not." But hope and certainty were different countries, and Caleb found himself stranded somewhere between them, watching the woman he was falling for slowly disappear behind walls of stress and secrecy. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in late spring. Caleb had taken Sarah to her swimming lessons at the YMCA, the weekly ritual that usually involved him sitting poolside with other parents, half watching the kids splash around while catching up on paperwork. But today, his attention kept drifting to his phone, to the message he'd sent Adriana 3 hours ago that still sat unanswered. Marcus dropped onto the bench beside him with the casual intrusion of old friendship. "You look like someone trying to solve a math problem with missing numbers." "That obvious?" "Your daughter just did a cannonball that soaked Mrs. Peterson's purse, and you didn't even flinch. So yeah, pretty obvious." Marcus stretched out his legs, watching the kids in the pool. "Adriana? Is it that transparent?" "Brother, you've had that look since high school whenever something was eating at you. Usually meant you were about to do something either really stupid or really brave." He paused. "Sometimes both." Caleb set his phone face down, forcing himself to focus. She's pulling away. Not completely, but enough that I can feel it. And every time I ask what's wrong, she says she's handling it. Maybe she is. Or maybe she's drowning and too proud to ask for help. Marcus considered this, his expression thoughtful. You know what your problem is? You're a fixer. Someone shows you a crack, you want to patch it before it spreads. But some people don't want to be fixed. They want to be trusted to handle their own repairs. Even when they're doing it wrong? Especially then. That's what respect looks like sometimes, letting people fail on their own terms instead of succeeding on yours. The wisdom stung because it was probably right. Caleb had spent their entire relationship watching Adriana be competent, controlled, brilliantly capable. Maybe his need to help was less about her actual needs and more about his own discomfort with not being needed. So what do I do? Be there, don't push. And when she's ready to let you in, make sure you're still standing in the same spot. Marcus stood, brushing water droplets from his jeans. Also, maybe check your phone. It's been buzzing for the last 2 minutes. Caleb looked down to find 3 messages from Adriana in rapid succession. I need to talk to you. Not tonight. Can't explain tomorrow? Your place after Sarah's asleep? His stomach tightened with a mixture of relief and dread. Of course. Whatever you need. The response came immediately. Thank you. That night, Caleb went through the motions of dinner and bath time with only half his mind present. Sarah noticed, the way she always did, crawling into his lap during their bedtime reading ritual with her favorite book about a bear who couldn't sleep. Are you sad, Daddy? No, baby. Just thinking. About Adriana? He shouldn't have been surprised by her perceptiveness. Yeah, about Adriana. Is she sick? Not the way you mean. But sometimes grown-ups get tired in their heads, not just their bodies, and that can make them act different. Sarah absorbed this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand adult complexities beyond her grasp. When I get tired in my head, you give me quiet time. Does Adriana need quiet time? Maybe she does, sweetheart. You should tell her. You're really good at quiet time. Caleb hugged his daughter close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, grateful for the simple wisdom of a 5-year-old perspective. You're pretty smart, you know that? I know, Sarah said matter-of-factly, snuggling deeper into his embrace. That's why you keep me. The next evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. Caleb had cleaned the house, not frantically, but thoroughly, giving his hands something to do while his mind raced through scenarios. Sarah had gone down easily, exhausted from a field trip to the zoo, her sleep immediate and deep. Adriana arrived at 8:30, and Caleb knew immediately that something fundamental had shifted. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd been carrying weight that had finally compressed her down to something more fragile than the confident CEO he'd first met. The professional polish was gone. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt that might have been the same clothes she'd slept in. Hey, she said, the single word carrying exhaustion. Come in. She moved past him into the living room, then stood in the center of it like she'd forgotten how to sit down. Caleb waited, every instinct screaming to fix, to solve, to make whatever was wrong go away. But Marcus's words echoed, be there, don't push. I don't know how to start this conversation, Adriana finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Start anywhere. I'm listening. She turned to face him, and he saw tears tracking down her face, silent and devastating. I'm losing everything, Caleb. The company, my reputation, maybe my sanity. And I've been trying so hard to keep it together, to not let you see how bad it is, because if you knew, you'd realize what a disaster you got involved with. Adriana, no, let me finish. Please, I need to say this. She wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture that made Caleb's chest ache. You remember I told you about the company's growth, 300% in 2 years? I remember. That growth came from a partnership, a major client, Cooper Consolidated, who needed comprehensive logistics support for their retail operations. They were expanding aggressively, opening new locations every quarter, and they needed someone who could scale with them. We won the contract 18 months ago, and it was everything I'd worked for. The validation, the revenue, the proof that my business model worked. She paused, and Caleb could see her gathering courage for whatever came next. The contract was 60% of our revenue. I knew that was risky, Every business advisor I talked to said, don't put that many eggs in one basket, but the opportunity was so good, and I was so sure I could manage the risk. Her laugh was bitter. Hubris. That's what they'll call it when they write the post-mortem. What happened? Cooper Consolidated declared bankruptcy 3 weeks ago. Chapter 11, total collapse. Turns out their expansion was funded by debt they couldn't service, and when the banks called the loans, everything fell apart overnight. She met his eyes, and the devastation there was raw. Our contract? Worthless. The receivables we were counting on? Never coming. And because we'd scaled up to handle their volume, we have overhead we can't support without that revenue stream. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. How bad is it? We'll make payroll this month. Maybe next month if I can negotiate payment deferrals with our vendors. After that? She shrugged helplessly. I've been meeting with banks, trying to secure a bridge loan to keep us afloat while I pivot to new clients. But the same growth that made us attractive 18 months ago makes us risky now. We're leveraged, we're dependent on a client that no longer exists, and every financial institution I talk to sees a company in free fall. Your employees know? I've been honest with the leadership team. They're trying to help, working extra hours, reaching out to their networks for new business. But morale is terrible, and I can't blame them. They see me stressed, they hear the whispers about layoffs. They know the company they joined isn't the stable place it was 6 months ago. Caleb moved to the couch, sitting down heavily as the full scope of what she was describing settled over him. Is that why you've been pulling away? Why you canceled dinners and showed up late? I didn't want you to see me like this. Weak. Failing. Everything I built turning to dust because I made one strategic mistake. She finally sat, choosing the armchair across from him rather than the space beside him on the couch. The physical distance felt deliberate, painful. You and Sarah, you're the only good thing in my life right now, the only place where I can pretend everything isn't falling apart. And I was terrified that if you saw the truth, you'd realize I'm not who you thought I was. And who did I think you were? Someone strong, someone who had it together, someone worthy of being part of your daughter's life. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with self-recrimination and fear. Caleb let them settle, choosing his response carefully. The woman I met walked into a restaurant with a torn dress and owned it. She's brilliant and driven and cares so much about her employees that she's willing to work herself to exhaustion trying to save their jobs. She sits on my daughter's bedroom floor and talks about Lego architecture like it's the most important thing in the world. That's who I think you are, Adriana. That hasn't changed. But I'm failing. You're in a hard situation that isn't entirely your fault. That's not the same as failing. Feels the same from where I'm sitting. Caleb stood and crossed to her chair, kneeling beside it so they were eye level. Look at me. She did, reluctantly. I've been exactly where you are. Different circumstances, but the same fear. When Sarah's mom left, I had a 6-month-old baby, a business that was barely breaking even, and no idea how I was going to manage either one. I was terrified every single day, convinced I was going to screw up both the business and the parenting so badly that I'd destroy everything. You know what got me through? What? Accepting that I couldn't do it alone. My mom helped with Sarah. Marcus covered for me on job sites when I had to leave for daycare emergencies. My crew worked extra hours without complaint when I had to cut back my schedule. I had to let people in, even when every instinct said asking for help made me weak. That's different. Sarah needed you. She was your responsibility. And your 78 employees, they're not your responsibility? The question landed like he'd hoped it would. Adriana's expression shifted, some of the defensive walls cracking. I don't know how to ask for help, she whispered. I've built my entire career on being the person who solves problems, not the person who has them. Then learn, starting now, with me. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Tell me what you need. She was crying openly now, the careful control she'd maintained for weeks finally breaking. I don't even know anymore. Everything's such a mess, and I've been trying to fix it all by myself, and I'm so tired, Caleb. I'm so incredibly tired. He pulled her into his arms, and she came without resistance, curling into him like she could make herself smaller, safer, hidden from the weight of her crumbling empire. He held her while she cried, one hand stroking her hair, the other rubbing circles on her back, offering the only thing he had, presence, steadiness, the certainty that she wasn't alone. They stayed like that for a long time, Adriana's tears eventually giving way to shaky breaths, and then to exhausted quiet. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red-rimmed but clearer than they'd been in weeks. "I'm sorry," she said, "for pushing you away, for not trusting you with this sooner." "You're sorry for being human? That's a high standard." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Force of habit." "New habit," Caleb said firmly. "We're in this together now. Whatever happens with the company, you don't face it alone." "I don't know what that looks like." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out." He stood, pulling her up with him. "But first, you're going to eat something, because I'm willing to bet you haven't had a real meal today. Then you're going to tell me everything about the business situation, not the sanitized version, the real one. And then we're going to come up with a plan." "Just like that?" "Just like that." In the kitchen, Caleb made scrambled eggs and toast while Adriana sat at the table and talked. Really talked, without the defensive barriers she'd been maintaining. She explained the intricacies of logistics contracts, the cash flow problems created by Cooper's bankruptcy, the specific vendors who were pressuring her for payment, and the ones who'd agreed to wait. She showed him spreadsheets on her phone, profit and loss statements that painted a picture more dire than he'd imagined. "The grocery store situation is the worst of it," she said, picking at her eggs with more movement than actual eating. Cooper ran a chain of specialty grocery stores, organic, locally sourced, all the buzzwords that attracted a certain demographic. We managed the entire supply chain for them. When they went under, 16 locations were left in limbo. Some are being bought by larger chains, some are just shutting down completely. "And your company?" "We're still technically contracted to manage deliveries for the transition period, but there's no money to pay us. I've got drivers making runs, warehouse staff processing orders, all generating costs we can't recover. I should just walk away, cut our losses. But these stores employ people, real people with families and mortgages and lives that depend on their paychecks. The longer I can keep supplies flowing, the longer those employees stay working while the bankruptcy courts sort everything out." Caleb set down his coffee mug with deliberate care. "You're keeping a failed client operational at your own expense to protect their employees? When you say it like that, it sounds stupid. It sounds like exactly who you are." He reached across the table and took her hand. "But Adriana, you can't save everyone. Not if it means destroying yourself in the process." "I know. Logically, I know that. But every time I think about making the call to pull our support, I see the faces of the people who'll lose their jobs because I gave up." "You're not giving up. You're making an impossible choice in an impossible situation." She squeezed his hand, gratitude and grief mixing in her expression. "How are you so calm about all this? I just unloaded the fact that I'm probably going to lose my company, and you're sitting here making eggs like it's a regular Thursday." "I've learned something in construction," Caleb said. "When a structure starts to fail, panicking doesn't help. You assess the damage, identify what can be saved, and make a plan. Sometimes you can repair it. Sometimes you have to tear it down and rebuild from scratch. But freaking out while the walls are falling doesn't accomplish anything except getting you hurt. So what's your assessment? Can this be saved?" Caleb pulled out his own phone, opening the Notes app. "Walk me through your options. All of them, even the ones you don't like." They spent the next 2 hours going through scenarios. Adriana had already explored most of them. Aggressive cost-cutting, selling off assets, bringing in investors who'd want equity she wasn't ready to surrender. Each option came with compromises that made her voice tight with frustration. "What about the grocery stores?" Caleb asked. "The ones in transition. Are any of them being bought as ongoing operations?" "Some." "Why?" "Because if they're being bought, that means someone sees value there. Someone who'll need logistics support once the acquisition closes." Adriana's eyes sharpened with interest. "The acquiring companies would likely bring their own logistics partners, enterprise-level relationships we can't compete with." "Maybe. But enterprise-level relationships move slow and transitions are chaos. What if you positioned yourself not as a long-term partner, but as the bridge? You already know these stores' systems, their suppliers, their delivery schedules. You could offer to manage the transition period while the new owners get their infrastructure in place. That's 3 months of work, maybe 6. Not a solution, just delaying the inevitable. Or it's breathing room, time to diversify your client base, to find new revenue streams without the pressure of imminent collapse. Caleb leaned forward, warming to the idea. And it gives you a story to tell the banks. Not, my major client failed and I'm scrambling, but I'm successfully managing a complex transition that demonstrates our value and expertise. Adriana stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language she was still translating. That could work. It would mean being really strategic about which stores to support, which transitions to offer services for. And I'd need to negotiate actual payment terms this time, maybe even upfront deposits to cover costs. Can you do that? I don't know, but it's the first idea in 3 weeks that doesn't feel like choosing which limb to amputate. She pulled out her phone, fingers already flying across the screen, making notes. I'd need to identify the most stable acquisitions, the buyers most likely to close quickly. And I'd need to have realistic conversations with my team about what we can actually deliver with reduced resources. Realistic is good. Realistic means honest, and honest builds trust. They talked until past midnight, Adriana's energy returning as the paralysis of isolation gave way to the momentum of collaboration. She wasn't just accepting his help, she was engaging with it, building on his ideas, pushing back when something didn't make sense. It was the Adriana from their early dates, sharp and confident, but now without the walls between them. Finally, she set her phone down and looked at him with eyes that were tired but clear. I should go, let you sleep. Stay. The word came out before Caleb fully thought it through, but once it was spoken, he didn't take it back. Caleb, not like that. I just mean you shouldn't drive home at midnight when you're exhausted. Take my bed, I'll take the couch. I can't kick you out of your own bed. Sure you can. I've slept on that couch plenty of times, way more comfortable than you'd think. He stood, stretching muscles that had tensed during their long conversation. Besides, Sarah's going to be up at 6 demanding pancakes. If you're here, she'll be thrilled, and you'll get to see her before you have to face whatever Friday throws at you. Adriana hesitated, and Caleb could see the internal debate playing across her face. The part of her that maintained control warring with the part that was simply too tired to keep fighting. Okay, she said finally. Thank you. He showed her to his room, found her a clean t-shirt to sleep in, left her with reassurances that she shouldn't feel guilty about taking his space. Back in the living room, he made up the couch with spare blankets and lay in the dark, thinking about the woman sleeping in his bed and the daughter sleeping down the hall. Somewhere between concern and hope, between fear and possibility, Caleb found himself drifting towards sleep with the strange certainty that something had fundamentally shifted tonight. Not solved, Adriana's problems were too big for one conversation to fix, but changed in a way that mattered. They were in it together now, whatever came next. Morning arrived with Sarah's feet on his chest and her voice announcing that she was starving. And also there was someone in Daddy's bed, and was it Adriana because she peeked? And it looked like Adriana's hair. Yes, it's Adriana, Caleb confirmed, lifting Sarah off his chest and sitting up. She had a tough day yesterday and needed somewhere safe to rest. Like when I have bad dreams and sleep in your bed? Exactly like that. Okay. Can we make pancakes extra special then? With chocolate chips? I think that's a great idea. They were in the kitchen making what Sarah had declared the most special pancakes ever, when Adriana appeared in the doorway wearing Caleb's t-shirt and a pair of his sweatpants she'd apparently found, her hair a mess and her face makeup free. She looked younger this way, more vulnerable, and Sarah's delighted squeal at seeing her brought the first genuine smile Caleb had seen on Adriana's face in days. You stayed! Sarah launched herself at Adriana with the full force of 5-year-old enthusiasm. I did. Your dad said I could. Adriana caught her, lifting her up despite the awkward angle. What are we making? Special pancakes because you had a bad day. With chocolate chips. And maybe bananas if you want them because bananas are good for sad. Adriana's eyes met Caleb's over Sarah's head. Something passing between them that was gratitude and affection and the beginning of something that looked like trust. Bananas sound perfect, Adriana said. They made breakfast together, the three of them moving around the kitchen in a choreography that was becoming familiar. Sarah narrated her pancake decorating process with the intense focus of an artist. Adriana listened and responded and slowly seemed to unfold from the tight, stressed version of herself back into something more relaxed. After breakfast, after Sarah had gone to play in her room, Adriana and Caleb sat at the kitchen table with fresh coffee. I need to ask you something, Adriana said, her fingers wrapped around her mug. And I need you to be honest, not kind. Okay, if the company fails, if I can't save it, if I have to declare bankruptcy or shut it down or whatever worst case scenario actually happens, will you still be here? Will you still want this? She gestured between them, encompassing the kitchen, the house, the life they were building. Or is this contingent on me being successful? Caleb didn't answer immediately, understanding that she needed him to really think about it rather than just reassure her. He thought about the woman who'd walked into a restaurant with a torn dress, the CEO who'd sat on his daughter's floor discussing Lego castles, the person who'd kept a failing client operational to protect employees she didn't even know. I fell for you before I knew you were a CEO, he said finally. I fell for the person who turned a disaster into something beautiful, who asked real questions and gave real answers, who treated my daughter like she mattered. That person doesn't disappear if the company does. But the stress, the financial uncertainty, the possibility that I might have to start completely over. Adriana, I'm a contractor who learned to be a single dad with a baby I didn't expect. Stress and financial uncertainty are my native language. If anything, you being human instead of perfect makes this easier, not harder. She studied his face like she was checking for cracks in his sincerity. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because her shoulders dropped and she exhaled long and slow. I have meetings all day today, she said, including one with a potential buyer for 3 of the grocery locations. I'm going to pitch them on transition support, see if your idea has legs. Good. And tonight, if you're free, I'd like to take you and Sarah to dinner. Somewhere nice. A thank you for last night and for not running away when I showed you the mess. You don't need to thank me. Maybe not, but I want to. She stood, setting her mug in the sink. I should go home, change into actual professional clothes, try to look like someone who has her life together. You do have your life together, just not in the way you thought you would. She crossed to him and kissed him, soft and certain. How'd I get so lucky to find you? Torn dress and divine intervention. Pretty sure it was just the dress. After she left, Caleb stood in his kitchen thinking about luck and choice and the strange paths that brought people together. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Saw Adriana's car still there this morning. Everything okay? Caleb smiled and typed back, getting there. The rest of the day unfolded in the ordinary rhythms of single parenting and work obligations. Caleb took Sarah to the park, reviewed project bids for an upcoming renovation, responded to his crew's questions about next week's schedule. But underneath the mundane tasks, his mind kept circling back to Adriana, wondering how her meetings were going, whether the transition pitch would land. What came next? His phone stayed quiet until late afternoon, when a message appeared. 2 of the 3 buyers are interested. Want to discuss terms early next week. It's something, Caleb. It's more than something, it's momentum. Adriana. Still on for dinner? Sarah's choice of restaurant. Caleb. She's going to pick the place with the crayons and chicken fingers? Adriana. Perfect. That evening, sitting in a family restaurant with checkered tablecloths and enough noise to hide conversations, watching Sarah draw elaborate pictures while Adriana explained the logistics of supply chain management in terms a 5-year-old could understand, Caleb felt the last piece of resistance inside him dissolve. He was all in. Whatever happened with the company, whatever challenges came next, he was committed to this, to her, to them, to the future they were building one imperfect moment at a time. And when Adriana reached across the table and took his hand, her smile tired but genuine, he knew she felt it too. They were falling, both of them. But falling together meant having someone to catch you, and that made all the difference. The transition deals closed within 2 weeks, faster than anyone expected. Adriana negotiated terms that included upfront deposits and milestone payments, enough to stabilize the immediate cash crisis and buy breathing room to rebuild. But stability and recovery weren't the same thing, and the path between them turned out to be longer and harder than either of them anticipated. The first real test came on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after their dinner at the Chicken Finger restaurant. Caleb was on a job site in East Nashville, helping his crew frame an addition onto a Victorian that had seen better days when his phone rang with Adriana's name on the screen. "Hey," he answered, stepping away from the noise of power tools. Everything okay? I need a favor. Her voice carried tension wound tight. And I hate that I have to ask, but I'm out of options. What do you need? My operations manager just quit. Walked in this morning, handed me a resignation letter, said he got an offer from a competitor that he can't turn down. Which I understand, I really do, but it leaves me completely screwed because he was handling the entire grocery transition project, and I don't have anyone else with that level of experience, and she stopped, breathing hard. Sorry, I'm spiraling. It's okay. Spiral at me. That's what I'm here for. A sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something closer to crying, came through the line. I need someone who understands logistics, inventory management, vendor relationships. Someone organized enough to manage multiple locations simultaneously. Someone I trust completely. You want me to help you find someone? No, I want you to be someone. Temporarily. Just until I can hire a replacement. The words came out in a rush, like she was afraid if she slowed down she'd lose her nerve. I know you have your own business. I know this is asking too much. But you understand operations, you run a crew, you know how to problem solve under pressure. And the transition project is only 3 months. After that, whoever I hire can take over the long-term operations role. Caleb looked back at the job site, at his crew working efficiently without him, at the blueprint held down by scrapwood showing the careful plans he'd drawn up. His company. The thing he'd built from nothing, that supported Sarah, that gave him purpose beyond parenthood. What would it involve? 4 days a week, maybe 5 during critical periods. You'd be managing the supply chain for 6 grocery locations through their ownership transitions, coordinating deliveries, troubleshooting supplier issues, interfacing with the new owners. I'd pay you your full contracting rate plus 20% for the disruption to your business. Adriana, I know I'm asking you to put your life on hold for mine. I know that's not fair. But I'm drowning here, Caleb, and you're the only person I trust to help me swim. The raw honesty in her voice made the decision for him. Let me talk to my crew. I've got 2 guys who've been pushing for more responsibility. If they can handle the active jobs while I focus on keeping new business coming in and managing the big picture, maybe we can make this work. Really? Really? But I need you to do something for me in return. Anything. Stop apologizing for needing help. We're partners now. That means your problems are my problems, and my problems are yours. No scorekeeping, no guilt, just figuring it out together. His silence stretched on the line, and when Adriana spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I don't know what I did to deserve you. Walked into a restaurant with a torn dress and refused to let embarrassment win. That's what you did. He could hear hammering resume behind him, his crew getting back to work. Send me everything your operations manager was handling. I'll review it tonight and we can meet tomorrow to go over the transition. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's what partners do. The conversation with his crew went better than expected. Tommy and Derek, 2 guys who'd been with him since the beginning, practically jumped at the chance to run jobs independently. They'd been hinting for months that they were ready for more responsibility, and this gave Caleb the push he needed to actually trust them with it. You sure about this, boss? Tommy asked, wiping concrete dust from his hands. Helping out your girl is one thing, but walking away from the business for 3 months? Not walking away, restructuring. You 2 have been carrying half the weight anyway. This just makes it official. Caleb looked between them, these men who'd shown up day after day for years, who'd covered for him during Sarah's sick days and school emergencies. I need to know I can count on you. You can, Derek said immediately. We got this. You go save the day like some kind of logistics superhero. I don't think that's a thing. It is now. That night, after Sarah had gone to bed, Caleb sat at his kitchen table reviewing the files Adriana had sent. The scope was massive, 6 locations, each with different suppliers, different inventory needs, different ownership transition timelines. Her former operations manager had been organizing it through a complex system of spreadsheets and vendor contacts that would take weeks to fully understand. His phone buzzed. Adriana. How bad is it? Caleb. Manageable. But your guy wasn't exactly documenting his process clearly. Adriana. That's what I was afraid of. I can come over tomorrow night, walk you through what I know. Caleb, Sarah would love that. Fair warning, she'll make you help with homework. Adriana, I'm very good at kindergarten homework. The next evening, Adriana arrived with Thai food and a determination that reminded Caleb of the woman he'd first met, focused, competent, ready to tackle problems head on. They spread papers across the dining room table while Sarah worked on letter tracing at the other end, occasionally asking for spelling help or showing them particularly good letters. This supplier handles all the organic produce, Adriana explained, pointing to a highlighted section of spreadsheet. They're reliable but expensive. This one does conventional produce at better prices, but their delivery schedule is inconsistent. The trick is balancing cost with reliability, especially during the transition when any disruption could spook the new owners. Caleb made notes, asking questions, starting to see the patterns in the chaos. It was like construction, he realized. Different materials, different vendors, but the same fundamental challenge of coordinating moving pieces to create something functional. What about this vendor? He pointed to a name with no contact information. They're listed for 3 locations, but I can't find any details. Adriana frowned, pulling the laptop toward her. That's weird. Let me check the master database. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, then stopped. Oh, that's Patterson's Dairy. Local operation, family run. We've used them for 2 years. So why no contact info in the transition documents? Because my operations manager probably had it all in his head or his personal phone, which he took with him. She rubbed her temples, frustration evident. This is exactly the kind of thing that's going to bite us. Institutional knowledge walking out the door. Then we rebuild it, one vendor at a time. Caleb pulled out his own phone. Give me the company name. I'll track them down. They worked until 9, building a comprehensive contact list, mapping delivery routes, identifying potential problems before they became crises. Sarah fell asleep on the couch halfway through, curled up with her stuffed elephant, her homework abandoned in favor of dreams. I should get her to bed, Caleb said, but neither of them moved immediately. Adriana was looking at Sarah with an expression Caleb couldn't quite read, tender and sad, and something else. She's so peaceful, like nothing in the world could hurt her. That's the goal. Keep her safe, keep her happy, let her be a kid. Do you ever worry about what happens if you can't? If the world gets in anyway? The question felt heavier than it should, weighted with something beyond hypothetical concern. Caleb set down his pen and really looked at Adriana, seeing the shadows under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth. What's going on? He asked gently. I got an eviction notice today. The words dropped between them like a stone in still water. What? My landlord sold the building. New owner wants to renovate, convert to luxury condos. I've got 60 days to vacate. She laughed without humor. Turns out when it rains, it really does pour. Adriana, why didn't you lead with this? We've been talking about produce suppliers for 2 hours. Because produce suppliers I can handle. Losing my home while my company barely survives, and I'm asking you to put your business on hold to save mine? That's too much. That's the kind of mess that makes people realize they signed up for more than they bargained for. Caleb moved around the table and pulled her to her feet, wrapping her in his arms with a fierceness that surprised them both. Stop deciding for me what's too much. Stop protecting me from your reality. We're in this together, remember? It doesn't feel fair. Fair isn't the goal. Partnership is. He pulled back enough to see her face. Where are you going to go? I don't know yet. I've been looking at places, but everything affordable is either too far from the office or in neighborhoods that feel unsafe. And anything in a decent location costs more than I can justify spending when the company's financial situation is so precarious. Move in here. Adriana blinked, the suggestion clearly catching her completely off guard. What? Move in here. I've got the space, 3 bedrooms, Sarah's only using 1. You need a place to live that doesn't drain your resources. It solves the problem. Caleb, we've been dating for what, 2 months? That's way too fast. Is it? We're already spending most nights together anyway. Sarah adores you. You're about to become my coworker. Moving in together is just making official what's already happening. He could see her cycling through objections, so he pressed on. And before you say you don't want to be a burden, let me point out that you'd be contributing to household expenses, probably cooking occasionally since you're better at it than me, and providing Sarah with a positive female role model. That's not a burden, that's a benefit. You're serious. Completely serious. She looked around the kitchen, at the homework still scattered on the table, at Sarah sleeping peacefully on the couch, at Caleb watching her with an openness that left no room for doubt. Can I think about it? She asked finally. Of course. But while you're thinking, consider that the alternative is spending money you don't have on a place you won't feel safe in while continuing to stay here most nights anyway. The math isn't complicated. The math isn't what I'm worried about. Then what are you worried about? Adriana moved to the window, looking out at his small backyard where Sarah's swing set stood silhouetted against the evening sky. What if I fail? What if the company goes under despite everything, and I'm living in your house working for your business's future because I'm helping mine, and I end up being the disaster that drags us all down? Then we figure it out together, same as we're doing now. Caleb joined her at the window. You're not a disaster, Adriana. You're a person dealing with an impossible situation with more grace and strength than anyone I've ever met. And whether the company survives or not, whether you live here or somewhere else, I'm not going anywhere. Neither is Sarah. We're your people now, if you'll let us be. She turned to face him, tears tracking down her cheeks in the dim kitchen light. I'm terrified. Me too, but being terrified together is better than being terrified alone. She kissed him then, desperate and grateful and full of a trust that felt like the bravest thing either of them had done. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through the tears. Okay. Okay, you'll think about it, or okay, you'll move in. Okay, I'll move in. Because you're right, the math isn't complicated, and I'm tired of pretending I don't want exactly this. The next 2 weeks were a blur of logistics, both professional and personal. Caleb dove into the grocery transition project, spending his days coordinating deliveries and managing vendor relationships while his crew handled the construction jobs with an efficiency that made him proud. Adriana started packing up her apartment in the evenings, a process made both easier and harder by how little she'd accumulated in 4 years in Nashville. I worked too much to really make it a home, she admitted to Caleb one night, surrounded by half-filled boxes. Most of my furniture came with the place. My clothes, my laptop, some books. That's basically it. My entire life fits in maybe 20 boxes. That just means you travel light. Nothing wrong with that. Or it means I was so focused on building the company that I forgot to build a life. Then we'll build one now, together. Sarah approached the moving process with the seriousness of a child who understood something important was happening. She helped Adriana pack books, carefully wrapping each one in newspaper like Adriana showed her. She cleared space in her closet for Adriana's shoes without being asked. She drew a picture of the three of them holding hands in front of the house and taped it to the refrigerator where everyone could see it. Are you going to be here every day now? Sarah asked one evening while they were sorting Adriana's kitchen items. I am. Is that okay with you? Sarah considered this with her characteristic gravity. Will you still do special pancakes on Sundays? Absolutely. And read me stories? As many as you want. And help Daddy when he's tired? That question made both adults pause. Adriana crouched down to Sarah's level, meeting her eyes with complete honesty. Yes, I'll help your daddy when he's tired, and he'll help me when I'm tired. That's what families do. Are we a family now? Do you want to be? Sarah nodded solemnly. I think Daddy needs more people. He works really hard, and sometimes he's sad even when he's smiling. But he's less sad when you're here. Adriana pulled her into a hug, and over Sarah's shoulder she met Caleb's eyes. He was watching them from the doorway, and the expression on his face was so full of love and hope and cautious joy that Adriana felt something shift inside her chest. The last wall coming down, the last defense crumbling. This was real. This family they were building was actually impossibly real. The official move happened on a Saturday with help from Marcus, who showed up with a truck and running commentary about how he'd known they were meant for each other from the start. I'm a matchmaking genius, he declared, carrying a box of Adriana's work files up the porch steps. You two should name your first kid after me. We already have a kid, Caleb pointed out. Your second kid, then. Marcus Jr. Or Marcella. I'm flexible. How about we focus on getting moved in first, Adriana suggested, but she was laughing and the sound of it made Caleb's heart lift. They worked through the afternoon, transforming Caleb's guest room into Adriana's office, consolidating their belongings in ways that felt natural despite the speed of it all. Her coffee maker found a place beside his on the kitchen counter. Her books filled the empty spaces on his shelves. Her toothbrush appeared in the bathroom next to his, such a small thing, but somehow monumentally significant. That night, after Sarah had been read to sleep and Marcus had left with promises to come back for dinner sometime soon, Caleb and Adriana sat on the back porch in the gathering darkness, exhausted and satisfied and slightly overwhelmed by what they'd done. "I haven't lived with anyone since college," Adriana said quietly. "I forgot what it feels like to come home to people instead of just space." Good different or weird different? Good different. Really good different. She leaned against his shoulder. "Thank you for this, for giving me a place to land when everything else was falling apart." "You're not landing, you're building. There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the neighborhood sounds, distant traffic, a dog barking, someone's wind chimes creating accidental music. The May air was warm and thick with the promise of summer, and Caleb found himself thinking about what the next few months would bring. His phone buzzed with an email notification. A potential client requesting a quote for a major renovation in Belle Meade, the kind of high-end work that could set his company up for the year if they landed it. He made a mental note to follow up on Monday, to show Tommy and Derek that even while helping Adriana, he was still building his own business forward. "I've been thinking," Adriana said, breaking the silence, "about what happens after the grocery transitions are done." "Yeah?" "I want to offer you a permanent position. Part-time, whatever you can manage around your construction work. Director of operations, real equity stake, not just salary. You've only been doing this for 2 weeks and you've already found efficiencies my previous manager never saw. You're good at this, Caleb." "I don't know anything about logistics." "You know about systems and people and problem solving under pressure. That's what operations is." She sat up, turning to face him with an intensity that meant she'd been planning this speech. "I'm rebuilding the company from the ground up. New model, more diversified client base, stronger infrastructure. I want to build it with you, if you're interested. Not because we're together, but because you're genuinely talented at something I need." Caleb absorbed this, feeling the weight of the offer. It would mean splitting his focus long-term, dividing his energy between 2 businesses instead of 1. But it would also mean building something with Adriana, combining their strengths in ways that could make both companies stronger. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, no pressure. The offer stands regardless of what you decide." "Would it be weird, working together and living together?" "Probably, but we're already doing it, and it hasn't been weird yet." That was true. If anything, working alongside Adriana had deepened his respect for her. She was brilliant under pressure, decisive when it mattered, and willing to admit when she didn't know something. They balanced each other well, his practical problem-solving complementing her strategic thinking, his calm steadiness grounding her intense drive. "I'll think about it," he said again. "But I'm leaning yes." Her smile was bright enough to see in the darkness. "Yeah? Yeah, we make a good team. We really do." The next month unfolded with a rhythm that started to feel like permanence. Mornings meant coffee in the kitchen while Sarah got ready for school, all 3 of them moving around each other with increasing ease. Days meant Caleb splitting time between construction sites and grocery store logistics, learning to manage the dual demands on his schedule. Evenings meant family dinners and homework help, and the ordinary chaos of a household that was becoming genuinely theirs. The grocery transitions progressed smoothly under Caleb's management. He built relationships with vendors, created systems for tracking deliveries, solved problems before they escalated. The new store owners were impressed enough that 2 of them asked about retaining Adriana's company for long-term logistics support, which opened exactly the kind of diversified revenue streams she needed. Adriana's company slowly stabilized, not booming the way it had been during the Cooper consolidated days, but sustainable, profitable, built on a foundation that wouldn't crumble if one client failed. She hired carefully, bringing in people who shared her values rather than just filling seats. She worked long hours, but not desperate ones, and the difference showed in her face, less haunted, more present. Caleb's construction business thrived under Tommy and Derek's management. They brought in 2 major contracts and finished them ahead of schedule, proving they were ready for the responsibility he'd given them. Caleb found himself thinking seriously about Adriana's offer, about what a formal partnership between their companies could look like. But underneath the surface stability, tension was building. Small things at first. Adriana working through dinner more often, phone calls that sent her into the bedroom with a closed door, the return of shadows under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "Something's wrong," Caleb said one night after Sarah had gone to bed. They were in the living room, Adriana on her laptop despite it being after 9, Caleb reviewing blueprints for the Belmead renovation. "And don't tell me you're handling it because I can see that you're not." Adriana's fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. For a long moment, she didn't look up. When she finally did, her expression was carefully blank. "One of the grocery store buyers is backing out. The real estate deal fell through on their end, and they're terminating the transition contract." "Can they do that?" "According to the lawyers, yes. There's a clause for material changes in circumstance. Losing the real estate definitely qualifies." She closed the laptop with deliberate care. "It's one store, not catastrophic, but it's revenue I was counting on, and it sets a precedent. If one buyer can walk away, others might too." "How much are we talking?" $40,000 over the next 2 months, plus the credibility hit if word gets out that contracts are being terminated. Caleb set down his blueprints, the numbers arranging themselves in his head. 40,000 was significant, but not terminal, not anymore. The company had other revenue sources now, other clients. But he could see the fear in Adriana's eyes, the worry that this was the first crack in a dam that wouldn't hold. "What can we do?" "I'm meeting with the buyer tomorrow, trying to negotiate a settlement, at least recover some of the costs we've already incurred. But honestly," she shook her head, "I think they're gone, and I need to figure out how to spin this to the other buyers so they don't get nervous." "You need me there? At the meeting?" "No, this is owner-level negotiation. You being there would send the wrong message." She saw his expression and added quickly, "Not because I don't trust you, because you're operations, and this is strategic, different roles." It made sense logically, but Caleb still felt the sting of exclusion. He was living with her, working for her company, helping raise the foundation that would determine whether her business survived. But apparently there were still walls, still places he wasn't allowed to go. "Okay," he said evenly. "Let me know how it goes." Something flickered in Adriana's expression. Guilt, maybe, or recognition of the hurt she'd caused. "Caleb, it's fine. You're right, different roles, I get it." "Do you?" "Because your voice says you get it, but your face says you're pissed." "I'm not pissed, I'm just trying to figure out where the boundaries are. Living together, working together, building a family together, it all blurs together until something like this happens, and suddenly there are clear lines about where I belong and where I don't." Adriana stood, moving to sit beside him on the couch. "You belong everywhere. In this house, in Sarah's life, in my life. The meeting tomorrow isn't about excluding you. It's about managing a difficult conversation with someone who's already looking for excuses to walk away. Having my operations director there makes it look like I'm desperate, like I'm bringing in backup because I can't handle it alone." "Are you desperate?" "Yes, but I can't afford to look it." The honesty in her answer took the edge off his frustration. This was her company, her vision, her fight. And he was still learning how to be supportive without being central, present without being controlling. "I'm sorry," he said. "You're right. This is your call to make. But your feelings are valid too. We're figuring this out as we go, and sometimes I'm going to get the balance wrong." She took his hand. "Tell me when I do. Don't just swallow it and pretend it's fine." "I will. I am." He squeezed her hand. "Go be brilliant tomorrow. Show them why walking away is a mistake." The meeting went badly. Caleb could tell from the first text Adriana sent afterward. "They're out, completely. Can't even get them to pay for work already done." He called immediately. "Where are you?" "Sitting in my car outside their office, trying not to scream." "Come home. We'll figure this out." "I can't. I have a 2 o'clock with a potential new client." "Adriana, I have to keep moving, Caleb. If I stop, if I let myself actually feel how screwed I am right now, I won't be able to start again." Her voice was tight with control, barely maintained. "I'll be home by 6. We can talk then." But 6 came and went with no Adriana. 7, 8. At 8:30, Caleb got a text. "Something came up. Don't wait up." He stared at his phone, worry morphing into frustration. Sarah was already asleep, confused about why Adriana hadn't come home for dinner. Caleb had made excuses about work running late, but his daughter was getting old enough to sense when adults were lying to make her feel better. At 9:45, headlights swept across the front of the house. Caleb met Adriana at the door, and the sight of her stopped whatever angry speech he'd been preparing. She looked destroyed, makeup smeared like she'd been crying, hair disheveled, still in the same suit she'd worn to the failed meeting 12 hours ago. "Don't," she said before he could speak. "Don't ask if I'm okay. Don't tell me it'll be fine. Just don't." "Then what do you need?" "I need to not be the person whose business is failing. I need to not be the woman who moved into her boyfriend's house because she couldn't afford her own place. I need to not be whoever I'm becoming." She pushed past him into the house, heading for the bedroom. Caleb followed, keeping his voice low so they wouldn't wake Sarah. "Talk to me. What happened?" "Everything. Nothing. The same pattern on repeat." She was pulling off her suit jacket with jerky movements. The careful composure she usually maintained completely shattered. The buyer walked. The new client meeting was a waste of time. They want services we can't provide. And on my way home, I got a call from my biggest remaining client saying they're reevaluating their logistics partnerships, which is corporate speak for "we're leaving, but we're too polite to say it directly." "How big?" 20% of current revenue. The number hit like a physical blow. 20% on top of the $40,000 from the terminated grocery contract, on top of all the other losses from Cooper's bankruptcy. Even with the stabilization they'd achieved, this was serious. "We'll figure it out," Caleb said, knowing how inadequate the words were. "How? By you putting even more of your business on hold to save mine? By asking you to work longer hours for a company that's circling the drain? By dragging you down with me?" She was crying now, angry tears that she swiped away impatiently. "I should have stayed in my apartment, should have handled this on my own instead of making it your problem too. Stop it. We made the choice together. You made the choice. I just took the easy way out because it was there. Because you were offering and I was desperate, and it was easier to let you save me than to actually face how bad things were." She sat on the edge of the bed, head in her hands. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Becoming the burden that ruins everything." Caleb knelt in front of her, taking her hands and pulling them away from her face so she had to look at him. "Listen to me. You are not a burden. You are a person I love who's going through something impossibly hard. And yes, it affects me. Yes, it affects Sarah. But that doesn't make it wrong. That's what family means. I'm going to lose the company." The words came out flat, defeated. "Not today, maybe not next month, but eventually. I can see the trajectory. The revenue isn't there, the reputation is damaged, and I don't have the resources to rebuild fast enough. It's over, Caleb. I just don't want to admit it." "Then don't do it alone. If it ends, let it end. But stop trying to save something that might not be salvageable while destroying yourself in the process." She looked at him with eyes that were lost and searching. "What do I do?" "Right now, you take a shower, put on comfortable clothes, and we sit on the couch and watch something mindless until you fall asleep. Tomorrow, we make a plan. But tonight, you just survive." And that's what they did. Adriana showered for 30 minutes while Caleb cleaned up the dinner dishes Sarah had helped him make. When she emerged in sweatpants and one of his t-shirts, looking younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her, they curled up on the couch together with a nature documentary that required no thought. She fell asleep before the first commercial break, her head on his shoulder, her breathing finally even and calm. Caleb stayed there holding her, thinking about partnership and sacrifice and the fine line between helping and enabling. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, while Adriana slept and Sarah dreamed in the next room, Caleb made a decision. If Adriana's company was going to fail, they needed to accept that reality and plan accordingly. And if it was going to survive, it needed more than just their combined effort. It needed a fundamental change in approach. Either way, they couldn't keep living in this liminal space between hope and disaster. They needed to choose a direction and commit to it fully. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow they'd figure out what came next. But tonight, he'd just hold her and be grateful they were still standing. Morning came too early, sunlight cutting through the curtains with an insistence that felt almost cruel. Caleb woke on the couch with a stiff neck and Adriana still asleep against his chest, her breathing deep and steady. For a moment, he just watched her, this brilliant, stubborn woman who'd walked into his life with a torn dress and somehow become the center of everything. Sarah's footsteps patted down the hallway, and Caleb carefully extracted himself from the couch to intercept her before she could wake Adriana. His daughter stood in her pajamas with her hair sticking up in 6 different directions, clutching her stuffed elephant and looking worried. "Is Adriana sick?" she whispered. "Just really tired, baby. Let's let her sleep a little longer." He scooped Sarah up, carrying her to the kitchen where the morning routine could unfold quietly. "How about we make breakfast together? Real quiet like we're secret agents." Sarah's face brightened at the game, and they moved through the kitchen in exaggerated stealth mode, assembling cereal bowls and juice with whispered commentary. But even as he went through the motions, Caleb's mind was racing through scenarios and calculations, trying to find a path forward that didn't end in disaster. The sound of the shower running told him Adriana was awake. 20 minutes later, she appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair wet and face bare, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater that made her look impossibly young. The devastation from last night had been replaced by something harder, more resigned. "Morning," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Morning. Coffee's ready." She poured herself a cup and sat at the table across from Sarah, who was narrating an elaborate story about her cereal becoming a swimming pool for invisible dolphins. Adriana listened with what looked like genuine attention, asking questions about dolphin preferences and swimming techniques, but Caleb could see the distance in her eyes, the part of her that was already somewhere else, planning or worrying or grieving. After Sarah had been dispatched to get dressed for school, Caleb and Adriana sat in the kitchen with coffee growing cold between them. "I've been thinking," Adriana said before he could speak, "about the company, about what makes sense." "Okay. I think I need to accept that it's not going to survive, not in its current form." Her hands wrapped around her mug like she needed the warmth. "I can probably keep it limping along for another few months, maybe a year if I get lucky. But that just means drawing out the inevitable while destroying myself and pulling you away from your own business in the process." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I need to make a clean break, wind down the existing contracts, pay off what debts I can, and close it before the damage gets worse." She met his eyes, and the pain there was visceral. "I failed, Caleb. I built something beautiful, and I failed to protect it." "You didn't fail. You survived a situation that would have destroyed most companies." "Survival isn't success." "Sometimes it is." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what she was proposing settling between them. Closing the company meant letting go of 4 years of work, admitting defeat to everyone who'd believed in her, becoming another statistic in the long list of businesses that didn't make it. But it also meant freedom from the constant crisis management, the stress that was eating her alive, the impossible choice between self-preservation and saving something that might already be beyond rescue. "There's another option," Caleb said carefully. "What?" "You don't close the whole company. You pivot. Scale down to sustainable size, focus on the contracts that are actually profitable. Let go of the dream of being a logistics empire and just be a solid, stable business that serves its clients well." He leaned forward, the idea taking shape as he spoke. "Keep your best people, the ones who believe in the mission. Partner with other companies for the services you can't provide in-house anymore. Build something smaller, but stronger." Adriana was shaking her head before he finished. "That's just slow death instead of fast death. Or it's smart business. Not everything needs to be high growth and venture-backed. Sometimes sustainable is enough. I didn't build this company to be just enough." "No, you built it to be excellent. And excellent doesn't require being huge. Some of the best contractors I know run 3-person crews. They're not trying to take over the industry. They're just doing incredible work for clients who appreciate it." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You could do that. Take the expertise you have, the relationships you've built, and create something that doesn't require you to sacrifice your entire life to maintain it." She was listening now, he could tell, the resistance in her shoulders easing slightly. "What would that even look like?" "I don't know exactly, but we could figure it out together." He paused, then added the thing he'd been thinking about since last night. "And I want to officially accept your offer. Director of Operations, equity stake, the whole thing. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because I genuinely think we could build something remarkable if we combined your strategic mind with my operational experience." "Caleb, you can't tie yourself to a sinking ship. It's not a sinking ship if we redesign it as a sailboat. smaller, more maneuverable, built for the conditions we actually face instead of the ones we wish we had. He squeezed her hand. I believe in you, Adriana. I believe in what you can build. But more than that, I believe in what we can build together. Not your company or my company, but ours. The tears that had been threatening since she sat down finally spilled over. What if I screw it up again? Then we fix it again. That's what partners do. The school bus honked outside, and Sarah came running through the kitchen in a whirlwind of backpack and excitement, pausing only long enough to hug both of them before racing out the door. Through the window, they watched her climb onto the bus, waving enthusiastically at her friends. She deserves stability, Adriana said quietly. Not parents who are constantly stressed about money and business decisions. She deserves parents who love each other and are building something meaningful together. The specifics of what that looks like matter less than you think. Adriana turned from the window, and something in her expression had shifted. Not quite hope, but maybe the foundation it could grow from. Okay. Okay, what? Okay, let's do it. Let's redesign the ship. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If it starts affecting Sarah, if the stress or the financial uncertainty starts impacting her life in ways that matter, we pull the plug. No heroic last stands, no gambling on long shots. Her well-being comes first, before either of our egos or business dreams. Deal. But that goes both ways. You have to promise to actually tell me when you're struggling instead of hiding it until you're falling apart. That's harder. I know. Promise anyway. She smiled, watery but genuine. I promise. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in controlled demolition. Adriana brought in a business consultant who specialized in company restructuring, and together they made the hard decisions about what stayed and what went. 8 employees were let go with severance packages Adriana could barely afford but insisted on providing. 3 major contracts were transitioned to competitor companies with graceful exit strategies that maintained relationships. The expensive downtown office was abandoned in favor of a smaller space in a converted warehouse that cost a third as much. What remained was lean and focused, a core team of 12 people who believed in the vision, a handful of solid client relationships built on trust rather than growth projections, and a new business model that prioritized sustainability over scale. Adriana officially made Caleb a partner, giving him 20% equity in exchange for his operational expertise and the agreement to dedicate 3 days a week to the company. The financial situation was still precarious, but it was manageable. More importantly, it was honest, no longer propped up by projections and promises, but grounded in what they could actually deliver. The transformation showed in Adriana's face first. The constant tension around her eyes eased. Her laugh came more quickly. She started sleeping through the night instead of waking at 3 a.m. to check emails. The brilliant, confident woman Caleb had first met started emerging from behind the walls of stress and self-protection she'd built. They developed new routines as business partners and life partners, learning to separate the two when necessary and embrace the overlap when it helped. Sunday mornings remained sacred. Pancakes with Sarah, no work discussion allowed. Tuesday evenings were for business planning, sitting at the kitchen table after Sarah went to bed, mapping strategy and solving problems together. Thursdays, Adriana left work early to pick Sarah up from school, and the two of them would have what Sarah called girl time that usually involved the playground and ice cream. Caleb's construction business continued to thrive under the distributed leadership model. Tommy and Derek proved they could handle complex projects independently, and Caleb found he actually preferred the balance of splitting his time between construction and logistics. The two businesses started feeding each other in unexpected ways. Construction clients needed supply chain support, logistics clients needed renovation work, and the cross-pollination created opportunities neither business would have had alone. 3 months after the restructuring, on a sticky July evening, Caleb came home to find Adriana and Sarah in the backyard with a blanket spread under the old oak tree. They'd made a picnic of leftovers and were watching fireflies blink in the gathering darkness. "Room for one more?" he asked. Sarah patted the blanket enthusiastically. "We're having a celebration." "What are we celebrating?" "Adriana got good news at work, and she said we should celebrate as a family, and I picked a picnic because picnics are the best celebrations." Sarah's logic was unassailable as always. Caleb settled onto the blanket and looked at Adriana questioningly. She was smiling in a way he hadn't seen in months. Genuine, uncomplicated joy. "We landed a new client," she said, "a mid-size manufacturer looking to completely overhaul their distribution system. It's a 2-year contract, significant revenue, exactly the kind of work we're good at." "That's amazing." "It's more than amazing. It's proof of concept, proof that the restructured company can actually compete, that we made the right choice." She reached for his hand. "We made the right choice." The emphasis on "we" wasn't lost on him. This wasn't her company anymore. Not really. It was theirs, built on combined effort and mutual trust and the willingness to transform something dying into something new. They ate potato salad and cold chicken while Sarah chased fireflies, her laughter punctuating the evening like music. The conversation drifted from work to weekend plans to Sarah's upcoming birthday, the easy flow of a family comfortable with each other's presence. "I want to take you somewhere," Caleb said as the sky deepened to purple. "Both of you. This weekend, if you're free." "Where?" Sarah asked, returning to the blanket with cupped hands protecting a firefly. "It's a surprise, but you'll like it, I promise." Saturday arrived with perfect weather, warm but not oppressive, with a breeze that made the humidity bearable. Caleb drove them downtown to the same restaurant where he and Adriana had first met, and he watched her face as she realized where they were going. "Caleb, what? Trust me." Inside, the hostess greeted them with a smile that suggested she'd been expecting them. She led them to table 12, the same spot where Adriana had sat 7 months ago wearing a torn dress and borrowed flannel, where their story had really begun. Sarah was bouncing with barely contained excitement, clearly in on whatever was happening in a way Adriana wasn't. The table was set for 3, with a vase of blue flowers in the center that matched the color of the dress Adriana had worn that night. "I don't understand," Adriana said as they sat down, though her voice suggested she was beginning to. Caleb cleared his throat, suddenly more nervous than he'd been in years. 7 months ago, you walked through that door looking like your world was falling apart. And instead of running away or falling apart yourself, you stayed. You sat down at this table and let me see you, really see you, in a way most people never allow. I didn't have much choice. The dress was pretty definitively torn. You had every choice. You could have left, gone home, hidden until you felt put together enough to try again. But you didn't. You stayed, and you were brave and honest and more beautiful than anyone I'd ever met. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Adriana's hand flew to her mouth. That moment showed me who you are. Not the CEO or the entrepreneur or any of the titles you wear, just Adriana, strong and vulnerable and absolutely worth everything. He stood and moved to kneel beside her chair, aware of Sarah watching with huge eyes and the other diners starting to notice what was happening. These last 7 months have been the hardest and best of my life. We've faced things that would have destroyed a lot of relationships. But instead of breaking us, they showed me exactly who you are when everything falls apart. You're the person I want beside me for every challenge, every victory, every ordinary Tuesday night. You're the person Sarah draws in her pictures of family. You're home. Tears were streaming down Adriana's face, and she was nodding before he even asked the question. Adriana Vale, will you marry me? Yes, of course, yes. The restaurant erupted in applause as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Simple platinum with a single stone, elegant without being ostentatious, exactly like her. Sarah jumped up and down, cheering, and Adriana pulled both of them into a hug that felt like everything good in the world compressed into a single moment. When they finally separated, Caleb pulled out a second, larger box. I have something else for you. Actually, 2 things. Adriana opened the box with shaking hands and went completely still. Inside was the navy flannel shirt from their first date, the one she'd worn to cover her torn dress, carefully folded. And beneath it, wrapped in tissue paper, was a dress, deep blue, the exact shade of the one she'd been wearing that night, but new and whole and perfectly tailored. I had it made, Caleb said quietly. Same color, same style, but without the tear. Because what we started that night isn't broken anymore. We fixed it together. Adriana was crying too hard to speak, so she just held the dress and the flannel and nodded while Sarah provided running commentary about how this was the best surprise ever, and she'd help Daddy pick the flowers, and could they please order the chocolate cake now, because celebrations needed cake. They stayed at the restaurant for hours. celebrating with chocolate cake and terrible dad jokes, and the kind of joy that comes from surviving something difficult and coming out stronger. Other diners stopped by their table to offer congratulations, and the manager sent over champagne with his compliments, and Sarah charmed everyone within a 10-foot radius with her enthusiasm. As they were leaving, Adriana stopped in the doorway. The same doorway she'd rushed through 7 months ago, late and embarrassed and trying to hold herself together with safety pins and willpower. She turned to look back at table 12, at the spot where everything had changed. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked. "That I walked through this door expecting nothing and I'm leaving with everything." She took his hand in Sarah's. "That torn dress was the best disaster that ever happened to me." "The flannel shirt didn't hurt either." "No," she agreed, laughing through tears. "The flannel shirt definitely helped." Outside, the Nashville evening was alive with music spilling from bars and tourists wandering between venues and the electric energy of a city that never quite settled down. They walked to the car slowly, Sarah between them, all three holding hands. "When's the wedding?" Sarah asked, apparently having given this considerable thought. "Can I wear a princess dress? And can we have it at our house? And can I help make the cake?" "We'll figure all of that out together," Adriana promised. "But yes to the princess dress, definitely. And the cake? Especially the cake." The drive home took them through neighborhoods Caleb had driven through 1,000 times, but tonight everything looked different, brighter, more vivid, full of possibility. In the rearview mirror, he could see Sarah fighting sleep, her head drooping forward before she'd jerk it back up, determined not to miss a moment of the celebration. At home, they carried her inside and got her ready for bed in an abbreviated version of the normal routine. She was asleep before the first page of her bedtime story, smiling even in dreams. Alone in the living room, Caleb and Adriana collapsed onto the couch, with the exhausted satisfaction of people who just completed something monumental. "I can't believe you did that," Adriana said, holding up her hand to watch the ring catch the light. "The restaurant, the dress, all of it. I wanted you to have the ending the beginning deserved." "It's not an ending, though. It's just another beginning." Fair point." He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling her heartbeat steady against his chest. "So what do you want this beginning to look like?" "I want to build a life that feels as good as tonight feels. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and honest and full of people we love." She tilted her head up to look at him. "I want to build a company we're proud of, raise Sarah to be brave and kind, have enough money to pay the bills without it consuming our every thought. Maybe get a dog. Definitely keep making pancakes on Sundays." "That sounds exactly right." "What do you want?" Caleb thought about the journey from that first blind date to this moment. "I want exactly what we have. This house full of people I love, work that matters, a partner who makes me better. Maybe expand the construction business a little. Take on an apprentice or two. Definitely keep the pancakes." "The pancakes are non-negotiable." "Absolutely non-negotiable." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people have stopped performing for each other and just exist together. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its nighttime rhythms, crickets singing, distant traffic humming, the world turning in its ordinary, miraculous way. "Can I tell you something?" Adriana said softly. "Always. When I walked into that restaurant 7 months ago, I was so convinced I had to have everything figured out. The successful company, the perfect image, every piece in place. And when my dress tore, it felt like the universe announcing that I was a fraud who couldn't even dress myself properly." "You weren't a fraud." "No, but I was living a lie, pretending strength I didn't always feel, hiding anything that looked like weakness or need. And then you handed me that flannel shirt and everything shifted. You saw me at my worst and didn't flinch. You just solved the problem and moved forward." She turned to face him fully. "You taught me that being seen completely, mess and all, isn't something to fear. It's the only way to actually be loved." "You taught me something too," Caleb said, "that letting someone in doesn't make you weak, that accepting help is its own kind of strength, that partnership means sharing the weight instead of carrying it alone." "We're pretty good teachers then." "We really are." Adriana yawned, exhaustion from the emotional day finally catching up. "We should probably go to bed. Tomorrow's going to be crazy. Sarah's going to want to tell everyone about the engagement, and I need to call my mother before she hears it from social media, and we should probably start thinking about actual wedding plans. Tomorrow, Caleb agreed. Tonight, we just celebrate that we found each other against all odds and somehow made it work. Against all odds, Adriana repeated. I like that. Makes us sound like heroes in our own story. We are heroes in our own story? You especially. You rebuilt an entire company while falling in love and becoming a parent to a 5-year-old who asks 8,000 questions per hour. That's superhero territory. You rebuilt your life to make room for a woman who showed up with a torn dress and a failing business. That's at least sidekick level. I'm comfortable being your sidekick. Good. Because you're stuck with me now. I said yes, no takebacks. They went to bed wrapped around each other, two people who'd started as strangers and become something infinitely more important. In the morning, Sarah would wake them up too early with questions about wedding dresses and whether they could have both chocolate cake and vanilla cake because choosing was too hard. The phone would ring with congratulations from friends and family. The ordinary challenges of running 2 businesses and raising a child would resume their steady demands. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of a house that had become a home, Caleb and Adriana simply held each other and marveled at the impossible beautiful thing they'd built. It had started with something broken, a torn dress, a failed date, 2 lives that weren't working the way they were supposed to. And somehow, through honesty and effort and the willingness to be vulnerable with each other, they'd turned that brokenness into something whole. The flannel shirt hung in Adriana's closet now, permanently claimed as hers. The new blue dress would be worn on their wedding day, whenever they decided that would be. The ring on her finger caught the moonlight coming through the window, a promise of forever made real. And in the bedroom down the hall, Sarah slept surrounded by drawings of her family. 3 stick figures holding hands standing in front of a house with a triangle roof and a sun that smiled down on all of them. This was what happy endings looked like in real life, Caleb thought as sleep finally claimed him. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and earned and absolutely worth every difficult moment it took to get here. They'd taken a chance on each other that rainy April evening at table 12. They'd chosen trust over fear, vulnerability over protection, partnership over independence. And in doing so, they'd created something neither of them could have built alone. A family, a future, a love story that started with a torn dress and a borrowed flannel shirt and became something neither of them would ever forget. Outside, Nashville hummed with its endless music, the city's heartbeat a constant reminder that life was always moving, always changing, always offering new chances to those brave enough to take them. And inside one modest house in a neighborhood slowly climbing toward respectability, 3 people slept peacefully, wrapped in the security of knowing they belonged to each other completely. The beginning, the middle, and the happy ending all compressed into a single moment of gratitude that somehow, against all odds and logic, they'd found each other and chosen to stay. That was the real miracle, Caleb thought, in the space between waking and sleep. Not the grand gestures or the dramatic moments, but the simple daily choice to show up for each other. To be honest about the hard things. To celebrate the small victories. To build something together that was stronger than anything they could create alone. The torn dress had been mended. The failing company had been rebuilt. The lonely single dad and the overwhelmed CEO had become partners in every sense that mattered. And the flannel shirt that had started it all hung in the closet as a reminder that sometimes the best rescues are the ones that save both people at once. This was their story, imperfect and real and absolutely worth telling. And it was only just beginning.